The sun bathed the terrace of Tulanian's palace in golden light, a perfect tableau for King Khazar's afternoon ritual. He reclined on a silk-covered lounge, eyes half closed, while two servant women kneaded his shoulders. A third, a young maid, knelt beside him, holding up a silver bowl of juicy grapes, from which she occasionally fed him one. Khazar sighed with pleasure, his gaze drifting over the newly landscaped garden, meticulously trimmed hedges, blooming rose arches, months of work by gardeners who could now breathe again. The flower beds that Lyra had once so carelessly trampled had all been restored. Beside the terrace, leaning against the massive palace walls, like a bored sentinel, sat Lyra. The giantess, who wore noble white and pink clothing to emphasize her high status, was in reality Tulanian's superweapon, 485 feet of pure power. She sat with her legs folded, her soles rough and dusty from long marches, always a silent threat, and palace staff dared not get too close to these natural weapons. Her shadow darkened parts of the garden, and she spoke in a bright but thunderingly loud voice. "Callista is making progress, Your Majesty. She has adapted well to her new giant size. Although she only reaches a third of my height, she is motivated and strong enough to destroy city walls. But new candidates, no worthy ones. I'm afraid I haven't found any others yet." Khazar waved a languid hand, chewing a grape with relish. Good. Callista will be our sharp blade, and you, Lyra, you look like you could use some relaxation. Shall I summon servants to tend to your hands and feet?" A mocking grin flitted across his face, soft and smug. At that moment, the broad double doors to the terrace swung open. A servant, a nervous old man, stumbled out, the words, "Your Majesty, a guest," already on his lips. But he didn't get the chance. A slender figure simply pushed past him, openly, as if the palace belonged to her. The stranger, a Qatar woman, an anthro cat, slim and agile, positioned herself wordlessly next to an ornate flower pot where roses climbed in full bloom. She adjusted her broken glasses, and her gaze flitted nervously up to Lyra, the gigantic presence that loomed over her like a cliff. Then, with a playful wink, she fixed her eyes on the king. Khazar's face contorted, a mixture of surprise. Who dares? The Qatar woman was small, barely 5'1", with spotted cheetah fur and unkempt hair. Baggy pants and a white shirt with torn sleeves hung loosely on her. Bandages wrapped around her arms, and scars from past battles were visible. Her paws tapped playfully on the cool stone floor. Instead of introducing herself, she drew a knife from her belt, a narrow, curved thing, and began to play with it, twirling, catching, twirling. The palace guards reacted immediately. Swords hissed from sheaths, and they moved into position, surrounding her. Lyra scrutinized the intruder from above, her eyes narrowing to slits, dismissive, full of contempt. She hated all non-humans, cat vermin, goblins, whatever. They were all just insects, good only for crushing. Khazar sat up halfway, the servant women retreating. "Who the hell are you?" he hissed, his voice high-pitched and shrill with arrogance. The Qatar woman grinned, her sharp fangs flashing, a playful, impotent smile. The knife spun faster. "Someone you need." Khazar's eyebrows shot up, his face reddened. "What do you mean, someone I need? I know nothing of this." She paused, the knife balanced on her fingertip. Her tail gave a slight lash, a nervous twitch. "Not yet, but wait." Her ears pricked up. "Just a moment. Right now." As if the words were a signal, a messenger burst through the door, a young soldier, drenched in sweat, panting like a bellows. He almost crashed into the guards, fell to his knees, and pressed his forehead to the floor. His body trembled. "My king, I have bad news." Khazar leaned forward, skeptical and annoyed. "What is it? Spit it out." The messenger lifted his head, eyes wide with horror. "Your army, it has been defeated. All the warriors are dead, all of them." Khazar's eyes flew wide open. He shoved the servant women away, who retreated with a soft cry. "What? All of them? That's impossible. Our army is far stronger than Zaya's, and that weird goblin giantess Floney is injured, so how can this be?" The messenger shook his head, words tumbling out. "It was someone else. Another giantess with a golden mask. She trampled them all underfoot like insects." A giantess with a golden mask? Lyra wondered. She knew this giantess. It was the one who had prevented her from killing Floney. Back then, she had almost finished off the wretched goblin giantess, and suddenly, this small masked woman had intervened. She had ruined everything. "But wait a moment," Lyra rumbled. "That giantess isn't even half my size. She's not even as big as Callista." Could the army not defeat her? No, O mighty noble Lyra, the messenger whispered. She has gotten bigger, much bigger. He looked up at her and added, trembling. About the same size as you, I would say. Lyra's gaze turned sharp. She straightened up a little. That can't be. No one is as powerful as I am. You're lying. Then she slammed her giant hand down onto the messenger. He burst under it. His blood splattered across the entire terrace. The Catawoman flinched too, even though she had been pretending to be so self-confident the whole time. The king rolled his eyes as Lyra lifted her hand. The completely squashed messenger stuck to the tiled floor. Oh, Lyra, what is this crap? Now someone has to clean this up. Really disgusting. He waved some servants over and pointed at the gory remains, while Lyra grumbled an apology. Then he asked, You know this giantess? A golden mask? That sounds like an alchemist. You can't trust those secret keepers anyway. Lyra shrugged. I don't know her. She only ever appears briefly and then disappears again. But apparently, she has her own agenda. While some servants eagerly wiped away the messenger's remains, the king paced nervously. What a shit show. Where did this new giantess come from? And what does she want? And why is she on Zaya's side? He looked up at Lyra, his voice a high-pitched squeak hanging in the warm air. And you only have one student who is smaller than you. The balance of power is shifting in Zaya's favor. This is unacceptable. I wanted to make Blake bleed for her arrogance, to have some of her cities destroyed. I wanted Zaya to drown in chaos. But how am I supposed to do that now, huh? How? The Catawoman now spoke up. Her tail gave one sharp lash, a sign of her pent-up energy. And that's where I come in. That's exactly why I'm here. I heard rumors quite some time ago that your army had failed, but I could create some real chaos. Khazar stopped, turned to her, eyes narrowed. And again, who the hell are you anyway? She put her knife away. A grin flitted across her face. May I introduce myself? I am Captain Kalira, commander of the proud Cata pirate fleet, ever at your service. She bowed with a grin, a deep, theatrical gesture that made her torn sleeves flutter and released a scent of saltwater and adventure. Khazar stared at her. Then a laugh burst out of him. That's ridiculous. What would I want with pirates? I want to win a war. The Catwoman cleared her throat, her sharp claws drumming lightly on the flower pot, a tactile echo of her impatience. But my wise king, where is your foresight? All great nations live on trade. What happens when Zaya's coastal cities are cut off from the sea routes? Khazar frowned, stopped, hands on his hips. Then they can't trade anymore? Correct. Kalira's eyes sparkled, her voice lowered to a conspiratorial whisper. And then they will no longer receive necessary goods. Medicine, spices, weapons, materials. Much of that comes to Zaya via the sea. All their wealth could vanish into thin air. She looked up at Lyra, a hint of challenge in her gaze. And I ask you, how will Queen Blake then pay her soldiers, supply her stupid giants? A quick wink at the giantess. No offense, my dear. Lyra snorted, a gust of wind that made the leaves on trees and shrubs tremble. But Khazar nodded slowly, as if a spark had ignited in his sluggish mind. Yes, that's right. Trade is important. Blake would be poor, and her giants would starve, or become discontent. That's perfect. You see? Kalira leaned forward, her voice gaining momentum, playful like a dance on waves. Excellent. And let me add, I am good at causing chaos. You want it? I can bring it to every one of Zaya's coastal cities, mercilessly, and with lots of fun, and my personal charm. The king grinned idiotically. Good. If you want to do that, go ahead. What's the payment? The cat cleared her throat again, her grin growing harder, her fangs flashing like pearls in the light. That my people alone control the sea routes and receive a permanent alliance with yours, and equality. I know you Tulanian racists hate us cats, but you are the most powerful nation, and we want assurances. That is our condition. Khazar waved arrogantly, as if shooing a fly, and let himself fall back onto the lounge, where the servant women hesitantly began to knead again. Whatever. You can have it. Now get lost and make your chaos. First, a signature. She handed him a contract written in elegant, flowing script, parchment that smelled faintly of ink and distant sea. He simply passed it to a servant girl. She read it quietly, her lips moving silently, then nodded. It's all in there, just as the captain said. Khazar pulled out a pen, scribbled his signature, an illegible scrawl, and returned the document. Very well, but now get out of my sight. I want to enjoy the sun. The Catwoman stowed her glasses and the contract in a trouser pocket, bowed grinning, and disappeared the same way she had come. Lyra looked down at the king, who asked, surprised, what? She could be useful. Lyra shook her head, I'd rather crush her. I don't trust her. And she annoys me, the king thought about it. This could be a test. All right then. Go ahead. You may crush the annoying cat underfoot. But if she escapes you, then she is our ally, and you accept that, yes? You don't have to tell me twice. Lyra stood up, stepped over the palace wall, towards the main entrance, and stomped after the cat. Khazar, in the meantime, leaned back again and took a deep breath. All this politics is exhausting. I always have to make these decisions alone when my sister isn't here. Where is she actually? Plush, 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 a barely tamed, satisfied grin played on Kalira's face as she left the palace. The heavy doors fell shut behind her, and the fresh air of the garden complex enveloped her. In her trouser pocket, she felt the crackling parchment of the contract, a tiny but immensely powerful weight. Done, she thought, and her whiskers twitched with satisfaction. She would bring her people equality and a future. With light, almost dancing steps, she moved across the finely patterned gravel mosaic of the main avenue, surrounded by the scent of roses and lemon trees. But then the earth began to tremble. It wasn't a random vibration, but rhythmic and powerful. Thud, thud, thud. The gravel danced around her paws. Kalira froze mid-stride. The blood in her veins ran cold. She knew exactly what this meant. Slowly she turned around, and what she saw took her breath away. Lyra, the huge giantess, stood right behind her, so close that her body completely swallowed the sun and enveloped Kalira in icy shadow. She had to crane her neck back as far as it would go, yet she could no longer make out Lyra's face clearly. Only an immeasurable wall of white and pink fabric towering against the sky, and high above, at a dizzying height, the countenance etched with contempt, looking down on her as if she were a bothersome bug. "You little pushy pussycat," Lyra's voice boomed down from the sky, a rumbling thunder that vibrated in Kalira's bones. And then the shadow moved. Lyra lifted her foot. It wasn't a hasty movement, but one of cruel, deliberate slowness. Her left foot lifted from the ground and hovered slowly over her. Kalira stood paralyzed, trapped in the hypnotizing sight of the huge, curved grooves and patterns on Lyra's soul, the last thing so many before her had seen. With a hoarse gasp that she barely managed herself, she threw herself to the side. She catapulted herself away from the avenue, a lightning-fast, uncoordinated leap that sent her tumbling between the rose bushes. Crash! Lyra's foot stomped down right where Kalira had just been standing. The explosion of gravel, dust, and earth hit Kalira like a wave. The ground shook. Crouched and coughing, she spat out dirt and looked back. Directly in front of her, not even 3 meters away, lay Lyra's enormous foot, massively large and deeply imprinted into the soft ground. Kalira would have ended up as a red smear under that sole if she hadn't jumped. Lyra smiled down at her, an expression of blatant, cruel amusement. "You're quite nimble, little one," she rumbled, her voice like rolling rubble. "But you stand no chance against me, and you know it. I will crush you like an insect and simply enjoy seeing your mashed remains in my footprint when I'm done with you." Kalira scrambled to her feet, her whole body trembling with adrenaline and shock. "Hey," she called up, her voice far too thin and small against the giantess's thunderous rumble. "What is the meaning of this? I have a contract from the king himself." Lyra's laughter echoed through the gardens. "The contract? That's just a piece of paper, little one. And papers mean nothing if no one finds out about them, and I will make sure of that." She leaned forward slightly and grinned wickedly. "Prepare yourself mentally to be crushed in a humiliating way beneath my sweaty foot." Lyra took a deep breath. She wanted to simply savor this moment. Then she lifted her foot again, very slowly, enjoying every second of the fear-filled silence from below. She held her bare foot directly over the crouched Catwoman, blocking the sunlight once more. "Look at my soul," she commanded with ominous gentleness. "That is your fate, for you are just a piece of dirt under my soul. Are you ready?" Her foot, that huge blanket of soft skin, hung motionless in the air for a moment, as beautiful as it was dangerous. But as Lyra's muscles tensed to execute the crushing stomp, Kalira was already gone. Not just a small jump. She had pushed off and was running for her life. Her body, built for speed and agility, raced down the avenue like a nimble grasshopper. A growl of annoyance escaped Lyra. She had been looking forward to this moment, to the satisfying crunch. "Stop her!" she bellowed, and her voice whipped through the gardens like thunder. The guards at the gates, previously motionless bystanders, jumped up in fright. "Catch the cat!" Half a dozen guards rushed at Kalira with drawn swords, trying to surround her, to cut off her path. But Kalira was uncatchable. She ducked under a heavy swing, leaped over a lowered spear, whirled between the men like a ghost. Her movements were a mix of acrobatics and pure survival instinct, a dancing, unpredictable vortex that the clumsy guards couldn't grasp. And as she ran, she heard behind her the angry, thunderous stomping of her gigantic hunter, which drowned out everything. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw another guard rushing towards her, and simultaneously, the shadow above her that darkened everything. In that moment, she knew what she had to do. Just as a good cat would do, she leaped forward, used her claws to grab the guard, spun him around, and pushed off from him with force. The man gasped in surprise and had no idea what had just happened to him. Lyra watched the Catwoman running from above and bit her lower lip. Everyone was so tiny, so insignificant compared to her. She wanted to crush her, hear her body crack, wanted to enjoy it. But for this nimble cat, she had to step a little faster. That's why she swung her huge leg forward and stomped down. This time, there was a distinct crunch and grind under her foot. It was such a satisfying sound, and as she twisted her foot back and forth, she could feel beneath her sole how the entrails spread, and that cheeky Kalira was completely mashed. Lyra closed her eyes and savored the feeling. This was something she could never get enough of. She opened her eyes again and moved her foot aside, dreamily, to look at the flattened cat in her footprint. But something was wrong. In the midst of her massively large footprint was a red stain, but something silvery and metallic was glinting there too. An icy shiver ran down Lyra's spine as she realized what it meant. She bent down, and her fear was confirmed. She had only crushed a guard. She straightened back up to her full height and scanned the area intensely, but there was no trace of Kalira. Damn it, that lousy little bitch tricked me. She may be a worthless insect, but I have to admit that was pretty good. At that moment, more guards and other servants rushed to the scene. "Did you get her, Lady Lagar?" one asked. Another cried, "Edgar! Oh no, Edgar!" and ran to the completely mashed body lying in the dirt. The young soldier looked up at Lyra, weeping. "Why did you crush Edgar, my brother?" But Lyra had no desire for discussions and simply used her big toe to crush Edgar's brother as well. The man screeched briefly before being crackingly crushed under the pad of her toe. "Does anyone else have any stupid questions?" Everyone fell silent. Then Lyra said, "Good, because I'm in charge here, so I want you to assemble a squad to search for that annoying Kalira. You are to kill her, and preferably burn her entire crew and ship too. No one should." Oh, such arrogance, such stupidity. She suddenly heard a voice from below. It was the head gardener. "All you can do is trample things. The whole garden is ruined again, as if we have nothing better to do than clean up after you. And on top of that, you have no understanding of diplomacy. What a disgrace." Lyra almost boiled with rage. "How dare you? Did you not see how you crushed poor Edgar and his brother? Yes, I saw that. You could crush me too, an old man who will die soon anyway, just like you crushed all my deer plants. Do what you want, you arrogant giant noblewoman. I'm merely stating the stupidity I am witnessing here. That Kalira is long gone over the hills. If she's smart, she's already had the contract copied by librarians or otherwise secured. If the people find out, and they will, then even the king will be forced to comply. And frankly, contracts are binding matters. If you don't honor them, civilization collapses. Not even giants like you can change that." The old man turned away and walked slowly into the garden, picked up a rake, and began to move rubble and debris aside. Lyra was so perplexed by his lack of fear and respect for her that she didn't even know how to deal with it at first. But she had to admit he was right. Kalira had won this round, and there was probably nothing she could do about it anymore. So she had to accept that the cats were now allies. Plus, the oars were heavy. Each pull strained the muscles in Sequoia's young back, a rhythmic, monotonous labor that was his life now. The salt air of the open sea mixed with the unique, clean scent of the healing herbs and medicines in the ship's hold. Precious cargo from the elven lands, bound for Zaya. "Blisters forming, lad?" a gruff but not unkind voice asked. Old Theron was leaning against a beam nearby, taking a break from coiling rope. His weathered face wore a small, amused smile. Sequoia nodded, trying not to show the pain in his raw hands. "It's demanding, sir." A raspy chuckle. "That it is, and that's how it should be. Hardens you, makes you appreciate the calm seas and the easy watches later. This work," he said, gesturing to the oar, "is the forge. You're being hammered into a proper seaman. One day, with enough sea miles and sense behind you, you'll be the one giving orders, not just following them. The work gets easier, or you get smarter about it. Theron pushed off the beam, a fatherly smile on his lips as he took a step towards Sequois, perhaps to clap him on the shoulder. That's when he ceased to exist. One moment, he was there, a solid, reassuring presence. The next, he was a violent red mist and scattered viscera, painting the deck wall and floor. A wet, warm rain spattered Sequois' face. He froze, the oar slipping from his numb hands, his mind refusing to process the sight of Theron's remains sliding down the wood. His brain, lagging behind the horror, finally caught up as he saw the object, a dented, heavy iron cannonball rolling lazily across the blood-slick planks before coming to a stop against a broken crate. Then another boom echoed, this one closer and louder, followed by the horrific sound of splintering wood and tearing canvas. Shouts erupted from above, panicked and fragmented. "To arms! We're under attack! Take cover!" More cannonballs tore through the ship's side. Each impact was a thunderclap of destruction, sending deadly shards of wood flying like shrapnel. Men were cut down, torn apart, or simply vanished in splinters and debris. The orderly lower deck descended into a screaming, chaotic hell. Sequois' survival instinct overrode his shock. He scrambled over wreckage, ignoring the dying moans around him, and lunged for the ladder to the upper deck. The scene that greeted him was one of utter despair. In the distance, he saw it, the billowing black sails of 9 swift pirate vessels closing in like wolves. Their own ship, the Elven Grace, was already listing, her beautiful carved railings smashed, her sails in tatters. Captain Compromisius stood rigid at the shattered remains of the helm, his face as pale as the moon, all authority drained from him. He wasn't giving orders, he was just staring at the approaching doom. Around Sequois, the crew's frantic activity was fading into a grim, resigned stillness. They all knew there was no outrunning these ships, no fighting off that many cannons. They were carrying medicine, not soldiers. They had nowhere near enough weapons to fight back, especially not against those advanced black powder cannons. They were doomed. On the forecastle of the lead pirate ship, the Qatar's Claw, Captain Kalira lowered her brass spyglass with a satisfied click. The merchant vessel lay dead in the water, smoke curling from its wounds. Another successful interception. Clean as a whistle, she purred, her tail giving a pleased flick. These last few missions along the trade routes had gone perfectly. Zaya's supply lines were bleeding, and the stories that Qatar was now among Tulanian's allies spread quickly. Kalira, of course, had the treaty duplicated and distributed to be on the safe side. Everything was going according to plan. A glorious future and lots of fun awaited her. She turned to her first mate, a burly catman with a scar across his muzzle. "You know the drill. Board them. Take everything of value, especially that elven medicine. It'll fetch a fortune or come in handy." As for the crew, she paused, her grin widening to show sharp fangs. "Kill anyone who looks like they can still lift a sword. Make it quick." The first mate nodded, sharply. "Aye, Captain." Kalira leaned against the railing, arms crossed. She gazed toward the distant horizon where the coast of Zaya lay. A thrill of anticipation ran through her. Soon, very soon, they wouldn't just be hunting ships on the open sea. Soon they would bring the chaos right into Zaya's harbors and coastal cities, showing their true power. Plus, Queen Blake stood upon a vast, crinkled sheet of parchment spread across the sun-drenched castle courtyard. Upon it was sketched, more roughly than well, a map of Zaya and the surrounding realms, annotated with hastily scrawled markers for the positions of Tulanian armies, the sites of past skirmishes, and the ever-shifting borderlines. The map was drawn to such a colossal scale that not only her human advisors could read it, but also her military council, the mighty goblin giantess Floni, who knelt patiently beside it. As Blake walked across the unfurled lands and painted rivers, she had a fleeting, almost dizzying thought. This must be what it feels like to be a giantess like Floni. The world is a manageable plan beneath one's feet. An amusing notion. Yet because the map was so enormous, she also found it harder to maintain an overview. She was accustomed to much smaller charts. She looked up and met Floni's huge, pensive face floating above her, etched with intense concentration. "What is it? What are you thinking?" the queen called up. Floni's deep, rumbling tone echoed across the courtyard as her eyes studied the map without looking at Blake. So, Tulanian attempted to take Zolingen. Logical. The city lies right on the border, and its granaries and treasury vaults are well stocked. A massive green finger descended and pointed to the spot. Blake stepped closer and positioned herself beside Floney's finger, her sandals treading upon the painted regiments of the Tulanian army. Right there, where you now stand, Floney continued. The masked giantess stomped the enemy troops to paste. The Tulanian force is significantly weakened because of it, a great advantage for us. Yet if we do not act soon, this advantage will vanish like smoke in the wind. Blake frowned. What do you suggest then, Floney? The goblin giantess drew a deep breath, a sound like a distant gust. It pains me to say this, but since the people of Tulanian evidently do not wish to prevent the war and are unwilling to overthrow their king, or even compel him to reconsider, we likely have no choice but to strike again. We must push the border back into Tulanian territory, maybe even further. And since we should not sacrifice troops, I must likely go. Blake felt her stomach clench. But Tulanian has 2 giantesses, and that vile Lyra is much larger than you. I cannot allow anything to happen to you. I won't have it. I would not bear it. A warm, gentle smile touched Floney's features. That is kind of you, my queen. But think of the people. If we do not act, there will undoubtedly be more deaths on our side. Furthermore, the masked one aided me once before. Perhaps Tulanian has greater troubles than we are aware of. We must seize this opportunity. She made a small pause, and a glittering pride entered her eyes. Besides, you did have new armor forged for me. What better occasion to test it? She tapped the massive iron vambrate on her forearm, overlaid with a layer of gold that gleamed in the midday sun. It was not mere ornament, but cunningly wrought protection against arrow volleys and catapult shot. Not just this vambrate, but her shoulder plates, knee guards, sturdy loinguard, the small yet thick shield, and the new 12-meter-long dagger all bore testament to the mastery of Zaya craftsmen. The masterpiece, however, was the bow, a colossus carved from the heartwood of ancient mammoth trees, its string a forged iron chain that only Floney's immense strength could draw. Thousands of hours of labor and a fortune in materials had gone into this equipment, but Blake knew it was an investment in their future, and Floney's proud stance revealed how deeply she valued this gift. Blake nodded slowly. Well, you are right. But I will only let you go if you take Adira with you. She is to support you. But Floney shook her head, resolutely, causing her lilac hair to cascade like a waterfall over her shoulders. Forgive me, my queen, but no. Adira's wounds are not fully healed, and she must still grow accustomed to her new size. Adira, kneeling beside Floney over the map, drew breath and was about to object, but Floney simply continued, outlining the thought so Adira could not interrupt. Adira should remain here, as a reserve. Should troops invade here, or should we have overlooked something? Or, her voice grew a shade quieter, or should something befall me and I not return? Floney, Blake protested, horrified. Do not dare even think such a thing. We must be realistic, Floney replied with calm seriousness. This war is not over yet. Many things can happen. But she ran a hand through her hair. I will have Noe with me. The little elf can fly, scout the area, and warn me if danger threatens. Nothing will happen to me, but I promise you, I will trample a considerable number of enemies. Right here, here, and here. That will shift the border deep into Tulanian territory, erase 2 armies, and take a town. Blake sighed, a sound of powerlessness and affection. She let her gaze sweep over her other advisors, standing silently in a circle beside the map. They all nodded in agreement. Floney's logic was impeccable. Finally, the queen relented. Very well, you have my blessing. Do it so, but be prudent, I beg of you. Floney inclined her giant head in a gesture of deep respect. Then she rose majestically, looming impressively over everyone. She looked down, smiling, at the tiny queen and her advisors. Then I shall fetch Noe now, and be on my way, with your leave. Blake nodded. Very well. Please take all the equipment you need, and have provisions from our stores supplied to you. Floney nodded respectfully, and stomped away with thundering steps, her huge feet navigating the narrow city lanes. Within mere minutes, the green goblin giantess, in her gold-gleaming armor, had vanished beyond the horizon. Blake watched her go, with a heavy heart. Truly, there was no one as important to her as Floney. Adira, the half-dragon giantess, noticed this, and said in a husky voice, Do not worry, my queen. Nothing will happen to her. But please, tell me what I am to do. Even if I am not fully healed, I am quite capable of fighting. Not yet, Blake said immediately. I would prefer you stay here and train a while longer. It is vital that you learn, at your enormous size, to move through the city with caution and without harming anyone. It must never happen again that someone is harmed or even crushed by you. Adira resigned herself. She had no desire to merely parade through the city for training purposes. It was such a peculiar feeling, being stared at by everyone. But things took a different turn anyway, for at that moment, a messenger hurried into the castle courtyard and approached Blake and her advisors. Queen Blake, we have received terrible news from Uferna and the surrounding coastal cities and ports. Blake frowned. What is it now? The messenger bowed. Pirates, my queen. Pirates are attacking more and more ships, and now a fleet is steering toward our largest port city, Uferna. An advisor cleared his throat. Now I understand. This aligns with the fact that we have been receiving fewer deliveries these past days. We first thought there were shortages with our allied merchants, but pirates? That explains much. Blake closed her eyes. Had the whole world conspired against Zaya? How was one to fight on so many fronts simultaneously? How was her realm to survive all this? Then she looked up at the half-dragon giantess. Adira, can you please attend to this? You should certainly be able to sink a few pirate ships, yes? Adira swallowed hard. Not out of fear. She had a more or less personal connection to these pirates. But she was desperate to prove her loyalty to the queen, so she nodded uncertainly. Very well, yes, I will do my best. Blake nodded gratefully. Excellent. I will arrange for troops stationed nearby to be sent with catapults. We must secure our supply lines at all costs. Otherwise, our realm will perish. The landscape trembled with every step. With a dull thunder, Floney's massive feet sank into the soft earth as she walked. Trees shook from the pressure waves, dust rose, and far below her, animals fled long before she was even visible to them. The sky above slowly turned golden as the sun slipped toward the horizon. Beside her colossal face, Nawi hovered. The elf seemed like a flickering point of light compared to the massive goblin giantess. Her translucent glowing wings beat calmly, casting shimmering reflections on Floney's green skin and the long lilac hair that fluttered in the wind. Nawi kept pace effortlessly with Floney's stride, even though each of the giantess's steps was akin to an earthquake. Floney cast a skeptical side eye at her, without turning her head. What's wrong? Nawi finally asked, tilting her head. You're looking at me as if you'd read my thoughts. Floney snorted softly. Because I kinda have. Her voice was deep, calm, almost amused. You're thinking about how many people in Tulanian I might trample, and how much I'll enjoy it. Nawi blinked, surprised. She sighed, then offered a weak smile. That obvious, huh? To me, yes. Floney looked forward again, where the landscape was already changing, becoming flatter, more open. And before you say anything, leave that decision to me. Whether and how many I will joyfully crush underfoot, and how many I will spare. The elf floated a little closer to Floney's face. You are actually thinking about sparing some of the Tulanian civilians? Her voice held genuine relief. Floney chuckled softly, a guttural sound rising from deep within her chest. Of course I am. Nawi frowned. How come? Floney's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in thoughtfulness. Don't fool yourself, she said frankly. I enjoy crushing people. I enjoy the way their bodies yield beneath my soles, the way the ground gives way under me, how small they are, how they crack and crunch, how they scream and pop under my weight. It's just so great. She twisted her lips into a lopsided grin. And yes, I enjoy their fear and helplessness too. Nawi swallowed but said nothing. But Floney continued, I have sworn not to destroy blindly. She lifted a foot, let it fall again, more slowly than before. I will only crush those who refuse to do anything about this damn war. Those who look away, those who go along with it, those who choose not to change. She glanced down at Nawi briefly. That feels just to me. Besides, it's pretty obvious I'll have to squash some to get the message across. The elf was silent for a moment. Then she nodded slowly. That sounds logical. She gave a slight shrug. I have no idea how you plan to put that into practice. A small smile flickered across her face. But I trust you. With a gentle movement, Nawi landed on Floney's head, amidst the thick lilac strands of hair. She knelt down, patted the giant's skull gently, and said calmly, Whatever you feel you must do. I won't judge you for it this time. She looked toward the horizon. This war has gone on far too long. And if, from your perspective, it is necessary to crush Tulanian, then I will have to accept that. On our side, many people die too, and the Tulanian people really could force the king to change something. Floney grinned broadly. Suddenly, she playfully laid her huge hand flat on top of her own head. Nawi let out a soft gasp as she was pressed against Floney's skull by the massive palm, the pressure all-encompassing, unmistakable. The world went quiet, her breath caught, her heart hammered. Floney giggled. "You don't get a say anyway, little one." Her voice vibrated right through Nawi. "I am the supreme military commander of all Zia. I answer only to Queen Blake herself." A lopsided grin was audible in her voice. "The fact that I listened to you last time was just because I'm nice. Understood?" Then she lifted her hand again. Nawi sucked in a sharp breath, floating dizzily back a little. Her wings trembled briefly. It had been terrifying. She knew Floney could have crushed her effortlessly. And yet, her heart was pounding hard, not from panic, but in a strangely warm, intense way. She felt it clearly, the sensation of utter vulnerability, and the trust that came with it. "Now I understand Blake," she thought involuntarily. "This feeling, it's overwhelming." Floney strode onward, toward the sunset. Tulanian lay ahead. And tomorrow many things would happen. Terrible things. Irreversible things. The next morning, port city of Vuferna. The earth trembled. Adira approached the city with thundering steps, each one a testament to her now undeniably powerful presence. From her elevated position, she surveyed the entire port city. The houses looked tiny as toys, the alleys like narrow furrows in the dirt. The people were tiny as bugs. They moved about frantically or stared up at her. But it was already clear that the people weren't afraid just because of her. Off the coast, 3 pirate ships lay at anchor, their sails hung limp, with few guards on deck. Adira's sharp eyes immediately recognized what that meant. Most of the pirates were not on the ships. They were already inside the city. Adira took a deep breath. Then she raised her voice. "I am Adira." Her words rolled like thunder over the city. "The mighty half-dragon giantess. This city is under my protection." The people froze. "All pirates," she continued, "who do not immediately leave this place and leave the inhabitants in peace." Her eyes narrowed. "Will have to deal with me." Silence. Then hesitant movement stirred in the streets of Vuferna. At first, it was just individual figures stepping out of alleys and doorways. Pirates, roughly dressed, armed, some with dirty bandages around their heads or arms. A few dragged heavy sacks from which silver coins clinked, jewels glittered, and broken goblets and stolen valuables peeked out. Others, however, held people captive. Men, women, even children, grabbed roughly, blades pressed to their throats. Adira's heart clenched. This was just like those good-for-nothing pirate scum. Can't do anything except threaten others. It's so disgusting that they want to protect themselves with hostages. She forced herself to calm down. One wrong move, a single careless attack, and innocent lives would be lost. Slowly, she placed one foot in front of the other, with deliberate control, carefully picking her paths through the city. Thankfully, she had practiced this enough in the capital. But she didn't just want to avoid the civilians. She also wanted to deliberately crush some of the pirates. The first one it caught didn't even have time to scream. Adira's foot descended with precision, relentlessly. The ground gave way, stone shattered, and the pirate was instantly crushed with a grinding sound, his body disappearing under the scaly sole as if he had never been more than a worthless insect. When Adira lifted her foot again, all that remained of him was a mushy red stain in her giant, nicely shaped footprint. Another pirate ran away screaming, dropping his loot sack. Adira planted her foot sideways, blocking his path, then grinned down at him, a feeling of sheer dominance practically surging through her as she recognized the pure terror on his face. She didn't want to admit it, but she was deeply enjoying this. Quickly, she bent down, grabbed the tiny screaming pirate, who seemed to be about 20 years old, and examined him with her huge, amused eyes. "Ah, if you hadn't made friends with the wrong people, I might have wanted to date you, you tiny cutie, but I can still invite you for dinner." With that, she opened her enormous mouth and let him fall in. "No, please don't," the young man screamed desperately as he slid over the slippery tongue, past the many sharp teeth, and deeper until he disappeared down her gullet. Adira swallowed and could barely fathom how much she enjoyed feeling his desperate movements in her throat and then in her stomach. Simply delicious. She moved further through the city like a living force of nature, slowly but inevitably. Pirates who had no hostages and didn't flee were simply crushed underfoot by her, one after another. Some threw their weapons away, tried to escape, in vain. Amidst all the chaos, she suddenly heard a shrill cry. Adira stopped. In a half-destroyed alley, she saw a boy, barely older than 10, being held by 2 pirates. One was pulling his arm, the other held a knife close to his face. The boy kicked and struggled, calling for his family. Adira's eyes narrowed. Quickly and fluidly, she swung her leg forward and brought her clawed foot down upon the 3 of them. All 3 screamed loudly. There was a crack and crunch as she landed with a thunderous impact. The boy was thrown to the ground and lay there trembling. When he dared to open his eyes again, he was surrounded by skin. Adira's toes. The two pirates who had just been threatening him were underneath them, both crushed. The arm of the one who had held him still poked out from under the massive toe, blood-smeared and lifeless. His fear mixed with awe, with an overwhelming astonishment at this unimaginable power. Adira's huge eyes examined him from above. "Sorry for the crude method. I hope you're okay, little one." He nodded, stood up nervously, and ran off. Adira watched him go and was satisfied to see he apparently found his mother. Wonderful. That's how it should be. Carefully, she then turned her attention back toward the city center. That's where the rest had gathered. On the large marketplace, the pirates stood packed tightly together. In their midst, the hostages, herded together, hands bound, some kneeling, others on the ground. Towering over them stood a slender figure with feline features, smiling confidently. Kalira, the captain of these fiends. "Well, would you look at that?" she called out mockingly. "If it isn't Adira, daughter of the late dragon lord Viserna. What an unexpectedly noble visit." A murmuring ripple went through the pirates. "Changed sides, have you?" she continued. "Or have you suddenly discovered you have a soft core?" She looked Adira up and down. "In any case, you've grown larger than I thought possible, even larger than your father." Adira's anger boiled over. "I had nothing to do with my father's schemes," she thundered. "And listen well, I am more than 3 times the size he ever was." Her voice trembled with rage as she stomped toward the pirates. "Release the hostages. These are all innocent civilians who have worked hard and honestly all their lives, unlike you villains. Throw down your weapons and disappear, or I will crush you all and burn whatever remains of you to ash." But as she spoke, it happened. Under her right foot, several barrels burst, old provisions filled with salad oil from the merchants' warehouses. The oil was so slick that Adira completely lost her footing and slipped. Her balance tilted, her legs shot forward, her massive body began to teeter. A panicked sound escaped her as she fell, backwards, out of control. The pirates leapt aside screaming. The hostages had no chance. With a catastrophic impact, Adira's enormous butt landed, right in the middle of the square, precisely where the prisoners had been herded together. The ground shattered. Dust, blood, and debris shot upward. When the cloud settled, it dawned on her what had just happened. Under her weight, nothing remained. Adira's heart skipped a beat. She immediately pushed herself up, staring in horror at the spot where people had just been huddled. Crushed bodies, blood, shattered stone, a ghastly sight. "No, no," she whispered, guilt hitting her like a blow. Laughter suddenly echoed loudly across the square. The captain bent over with scorn. "Brilliant," she cried. "The great savior. First such heroic speeches, and then this. That's just brilliant." She bowed theatrically. "You can't even protect those you want to save, you heroine." While Adira still knelt as if paralyzed, the captain jumped into a waiting rowboat. Several pirates hastily followed her. The boat pushed off from the cape. "Thanks for the distraction," Kalira shouted, laughing as they rowed toward the ships. "We'll meet again, dragon child, but not too soon, please. You should practice a little more. I prefer opponents who have some skill." Adira was left behind in shock, her fingers brushing over the completely crushed bodies of the many people she had accidentally flattened beneath her butt. Silence and destruction surrounded her, and deep inside, she felt that immense guilt. Her hands trembled as she slowly clenched her fists, and deep within her, something began to burn. The realization struck her. It had all been a trap. The fleeing pirates, the barrels of oil. They must have anticipated that Queen Blake would send one of her giants. Kalira was clever and ruthless. Filled with new rage, Adira stood up again and roared. "You think you can escape me, you piece of filth? I'm not just any giantess. I am a half-dragon." She strode closer toward the ships, which were just weighing anchor and trying to sail away. The largest ship in the middle had to be Kalira's flagship, even if she couldn't see her at the moment. The fire deep in her heart transformed into real flames as she furiously spewed a jet of fire directly at the biggest ship. Immediately, everything went up in flames. Pirates jumped screaming overboard. The masts burned fiercely, as did the sails. The other 2 ships were moving away quickly, but this one wasn't going anywhere. Adira waded through the water, hate burning inside her, then swung and punched her fist through the wooden hull of the pirate ship. Planks broke and flew apart in splinters. People screamed, and many fell into the water. Most of the people were burning and screaming in pain. Adira wanted to eat them, watch them burn, or drown. But, when she looked at them more closely, another shock hit her. They weren't pirates. They were all civilians. Adira's eyes widened, and suddenly she was no longer thrilled that the ship before her was burning. She cupped her hands and splashed as much water as she could onto the wooden pirate ship and pushed other parts underwater to extinguish the fire. She was in a panic, grabbed some of the floating civilians, lifted them up, and realized that only about half of them were even still alive. Then as she heard the echoing laughter again, she stopped and looked into the distance, toward where the other 2 pirate ships were now sailing toward the horizon. "Take care, you stupid wannabe heroine. You're a piece of shit. Ha 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 ha." Adira would have loved to chase after them, to kill them, slowly and painfully, but she couldn't. Unlike her father, she had no wings. That was probably the downside of being only a half-dragon. And the ships were fast. She had to decide, pursue or save the civilians. And she didn't have to think long. She wanted to make right whatever was possible. She gathered more and more of the utterly terrified people with her huge hands, fished them out of the water, and brought them back to land. This was all just another trap. Kalira must have known she would attack the biggest ship first. What a clever, evil. When she had brought all the survivors back to land, she collapsed, her giant body causing a thunderous tremor as it hit the ground. I almost killed all of you. I am so sorry," she sniffled, looking at the completely disheveled tiny people before her. Some shouted at her angrily, others cried for lost relatives, but some came toward her to comfort her. "You saved me," cried the little boy she had freed from the pirate's grasp. "Yes, without you, our whole city would have been lost," shouted an old fisherman. "Those pirates have no scruples." Others joined in, praising and comforting the giant dragon woman. Adira took a deep breath. After all that, it felt good to hear that her actions had at least brought some good. To be continued. Thank you for listening to this story. We hope you enjoyed it. If so, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment. And if you want to support our work, check out our Patreon. There you will get access to some extra content and works in progress. See you soon.